You're about to see is with Kris Ryan from Freedom Diagnostics. He took some time to answer some questions about some third party testing and just some overall information for you guys. We walk through how to read their COAs start to finish, all the graphs, what they look like, and what they're actually telling you. And then we also talked about the industry, how to store some peptides, and some other things. One thing I am going to mention, the camera started to lag like halfway through the interview during the screen share, so I just covered it up because it was kind of distracting, and I tried my best to put some edits in there so you could see exactly what we were talking about with the COAs. I hope this all makes sense. This might be more of a listening podcast, but I want to give you guys a heads up, and thank you guys for all the support. Thank you for taking the time. I know a lot of people have been wondering about third-party testing in the peptide space, and you guys have become a pretty big lab, at least to the point of people switching from chromate and Yanishik. I'm not sure how much you want to go into the background of, just companies coming to you and like where you guys are in the industry, but I know a lot of people have been coming over because that 1 to 2 day turnaround time is very important. So yeah, if you could just give a little bit of a background, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Just to tell you a little bit about us as a lab and kind of how this came to be was we started lab about a little over a decade ago in the clinical space, and we've done labs in clinical, we've done labs in environmental, we've done molecular testing, diagnostics testing, all types of different testing. Um, when this kind of came across our radar, it was more people were just asking for if it's something we could do, because I think the reliability of what's out there was somewhat questionable. And a lot of the stuff that we do in the clinical realm is focused around accuracy, precision, and speed. A lot of the testings that we've done in the clinical space are designed for physicians and doctors to be able to make like real-time decisions in order to be able to treat patients. And being able to bring that accuracy and speed into this realm, I think, has helped a lot of people out.
Overall, how many years have you been doing like testing for peptides for research companies and just in general?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been doing diagnostic testing for a long time. I mean, combined experience of our team is decades and decades of experience. Um, all of our team is extremely knowledgeable in the um, testing sphere, where when it comes to diagnostics, clinical, anything to do with the instrumentation that we're using. Um, I can tell you, it's not, while I have a lot of experience in lab myself, it's really, we have a great team behind this who's able to make a lot of real time changes, because the space does change so quick, to be able to keep up with what's new and how do we test for this and what's the best practice for X, Y, and Z. It's kind of being able to collaborate with a group of people who've all been doing this for a really long time, to be able to make sure we can keep delivering at the same speed and being reliable time and time again. Because it is something where this industry changes quick.
Yep,
So it's, you just really have to have a good team behind you and some good methods that are robust.
for sure. And I think we on our like original call you mentioned you guys do just peptide testing, right? I know that a couple of things you said was no HGH, no HCG, stuff like that. If you could go
That's correct.
into if you go into that, like, do you also test? Do you do anything like test like bacteriostatic water? Or do you don't go in that realm either?
So we do test endotoxins, and that will kind of fall in the realm of water. But mostly, I'd say it's research use only peptides is pretty much all that we are accepting. Anything that kind of falls into that larger protein or anything other than your typical RUO peptide, we're not currently accepting.
Okay, gotcha. And I know the tests you guys offer, so I have I have a little intake form that I'll just show on my end, just so people can just see what the process looks like when somebody is sending this out to you guys. So you guys offer all these tests. So you have purity and ID, endotoxins, net peptide content. Do you guys have any plans to offer sterility in the future or heavy metals, or are you just sticking to these main ones right here?
Ultimately, our menu changes based off of two things. One is compliance first and foremost, is can we do this?
Yeah.
And then the second part is it something that we are asked about enough that we feel like it would be helpful to the community?
Gotcha.
When we first started, we didn't have net peptide content going. And truthfully, that was out of ignorance in the sense of someone asked, hey, can you do purity? We're like, yeah, we can do purity. And then we just kept seeing, on the Reddit posts and things like that and emails being like, well, they need this. And we're like, okay. So it is something that like our email is very, very monitored.
Yeah.
We do try to keep an eye out for like what is helpful. Um, and if it's something that we are open to a lot of these things if it's something we're one able to, one compliantly able to, and it all these things do take some time, but
Yeah.
those are bread and butter. So if sterility is something that we need down the line, we may add it, we may not. We've been asked a few times, but the volume quite hasn't merited it yet.
Gotcha.
Um, but this is I'm glad you brought this page up just because
Yep.
this is something I get questions about a lot.
Yep.
The uh, purity and ID, and I don't want to overstep if you kind of have an order you want to go in here, but if you want me to talk about each test, I can, and then kind of explain
Yeah. So
that works.
so basically, like, let's just say, either an independent researcher or I'm a lab. And obviously, like, the process with you guys was super easy, which was one of the things, I respect a lot. Like, I reached out to you guys and I got a response within an hour. And I think that's, it's really important just to have the back and forth. I think one of the things you mentioned is, actually being a lab that people can talk to and understand the results of this kind of stuff. So, like, after you reach out and get these intake forms, basically how would somebody fill this out, just for peptide name, ID? Like, how does this rope in with the batch numbers for this process when I'm filling it out to send in?
For sure. Yeah. So that's a good point. So our whole angle to this is we do want to be very hands-on in the sense of when we get an email where we make sure to respond. If we give you a COA and it's just a COA that has a number on it and you're not familiar with this space,
Yep.
that's not terribly helpful.
Yep.
So not if you have questions on this intake form, email us. If you have questions on the actual COA, email us. If the questions aren't getting answered in email, we'll have someone reach out to you. The whole idea is beyond just this piece of paper that you're getting the information that you feel like you need that's helpful. But as far as this goes, the intake form is relatively simple.
Yep.
The more information you give us, the easier it is for us to create a chain of custody and catalog this to make sure that it gets to where it needs to be. I always describe in any lab, I've been in, any lab that I've built, I always describe the setup when you walk inside is very much like a grocery store self checkout, where you walk in, you scan the sample into the system, and that goes along with the name, that goes along with what's expected, what the tests are being asked for, and that ultimately is to make sure, hey, this sample is here, it got through the door, and so there's no mistake of like being misplaced or being put in the wrong area or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's very important. The more information you give us, it's helpful to us to be able to test it appropriately. Um, but each one of these tests, so the way this works is purity and ID is generally going to be paired with net peptide content.
Yep.
That's what most people, I would say, if I had to say, would order it in tandem together. It also does help us get you a more accurate answer because the purity is taken into account for the net peptide content. So if you're only looking for net peptide content, it's helpful to order both in the sense that it will be slightly more accurate having that purity because whatever the impurity is removed from the net peptide content as a whole.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And how common would you say, like, I've seen it done a couple times, but maybe out of, more of the research companies, or you can just say, if you could give like a percentage, how many people do check that endotoxins test when they send in their samples?
I'd say it's growing.
Okay.
It's definitely been growing. I think one of it is that it's another one that we added a little bit later on. So I think it's growing as people have kind of found out something we're able to do. But I would say when we first started doing it, it was few and far between, and now I'd say it's probably about 20% of people
Okay.
that are ordering through us.
That's awesome. That's awesome to see. It's, as people are learning more, like, even in this industry, as I talk to people, like, just researching in general, as people learn to read these COAs and, know more about these testings, that like they start to go more in depth and ask for the whole suite of testing, or at least endotoxins and not just purity and ID. So that's good to see. And then one more question on this page. So if someone's looking at this and they send in, because we kind of talked about this too, like let's just say they're sending in 3 samples from a batch for the same peptide, right? Would each of these be like an individual line on that, or how do you guys test like 3 from the same batch? If I send it in as like a group test or like an independent researcher.
I like that question. So I get that asked a lot as well. So if it is the way we handle this, if it's the same peptide, now it has to be the same peptide and the same peptide, same lot, same
Yep.
milligrams, then we can consider that as we call it a conformity test. So that's ultimately saying, hey, I have this one peptide in this batch, but I want to make sure that it's similar to the rest
Mm-hmm.
of them in the batch. And the way we treat that is it will be 3 separate COAs, but the first one, for example, if it's purity ID net peptide, be 225, and every one after that would be an additional 50.
Gotcha, gotcha. Because I know one of the common things that I've been seeing on COAs, and it's been kind of you know amb- ambiguous, I would say, is like a lot of them are either overfilled, or you don't really see a lot from the same batch. How often would you say you just maybe if you get 3 from a batch, that the net peptide content, is it there a lot of variance to it? Is it normally kind of the same? Like, what's your experience there with some of these tests?
Most of the time, it is similar,
Okay.
but not all the time. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I like to see a conformity test because
Yeah.
you can tell in a lot of different ways. If they're even before we are able to run it through the mass spectrometer or the HPLC, like you can tell some of the similarities are like, for example, the total weight. Sometimes they have like a 1 milligram variance, sometimes they have a 10 milligram variance, and it's supposed to be the exact same file, exact same lot. So it does kind of make you scratch your head even before you get your test results.
Yeah.
So while it is similar a lot of the times, and not always is. And also, like one thing I like to remind people is it's not a simple process on the other side either. Like
Mm-hmm.
1 milligram, for example. So
Yep.
that's a few specks of sand. Like that's not a lot of weight. So when it comes to testing, that's one of the reasons why what we able to offer is important because if it's very easy to miscalculate that or make a mistake on one side. And
Mm-hmm.
so just to show some congruence along the batch, I think goes a long way.
For sure. For sure. And I guess one common thing I just want to stop and maybe ask you about, because I've seen it a lot. People will send in, or people, you just get different, samples of a research peptide that's like, let's just say it's, a BPC, and like one is 5 milligrams and another one could be, 10 milligrams or even 20 milligrams if you've seen it. And in the actual, like vial, it kind of looks the same, just the way it fills as like the cake for the lyophilized powder. Is there's really no way like that doesn't indicate you should be going off the COA. You shouldn't just be going off visuals. That's correct.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Okay.
one of the main things that we do is like kind of what I mentioned earlier. Is one of the first steps that we do is
Mm-hmm.
remove it from the file, and we'll weigh it on a balance and be able to tell how much of the whole product is in there. Sometimes 10 milligrams will be a total of 80. Sometimes it'll be 120 milligrams. Sometimes it'll be 150. But most of the time, it's always the same amount of actual peptide in the vial. So really,
Mm-hmm.
the total amount of what is in that vial is really not indicative of anything.
Okay. Yeah, because I get a lot of questions about that, especially when you get into the more extremes, like a 10 milligram or a 50 milligram. Like, it's like this should be 5 times, and just not always the case with the fillers and other preservatives in there as well. So
No, because different people use different fillers. Different people definitely have different processes as far
yeah.
as how much and all those types of things. So it's completely independent, and it really is zero variability of what's actually in there.
Okay. I do have. Let me just share a different screen. So we kind of walk through the whole chain of custody process for, what's actually happening when it starts the test, and, how you guys separate it out, because it is very important. I've seen tests from different labs, either they they get, just mixed up with something. You can kind of tell. Like sometimes the labels have come back as different, not the wrong one. It's very easy to mess up, especially from anybody's end. So like you said, the more information, the better on that side of it. I'm gonna pull up an actual COA from you guys, and we can just walk through it because I want to be able to show people that you know it's not like incredibly difficult to read. It's just we kind of need the knowledge behind it too. So, and I'll show them. So this is just a normal COA from you guys. This one is glow. So I kind of wanted to go into one of the more complicated ones that's actually testing, three peptides. It's a peptide blend. And I'll walk through it how I understand it, and then if there's anything to correct me on, or you want to jump more in depth on, I'd like to get some more like explanations on these graphs, and I just have like a general understanding. So if you could break it down for people, I think that would be valuable. But
Sure.
as like this is your guys' COA, all of them look a little bit different, but a lot of things are the same. So in general, just looking at the left side, you have the actual product that's to be tested, right? You have this is glow, so this is GHKCU, TB500, and BPC 157, and the amounts are supposed to be 50 milligrams, 10 milligrams, and 10 milligrams. So when you guys test the actual net peptide content on this left side, this is how much was actually in those vials, correct? Like how
Okay.
much came out of the test. So when they're sent in, obviously, you know, you're just given that 50 10 10 amount, and then they could be overfilled, underfilled, like we talked about. So this is where you actually want to look. For something like a single compound like BPC, you'll just see one number there, and then you can kind of go based off that. And then the identity, you guys test for that, so you have to actually make sure it's what they say it is, in the sample. Um,
Correct.
and then the right side of it, I this ascension number, is that something you guys assign, or what is
Yes.
this?
Yes, that's the session number. The session number is essentially assigned to us. It's an internal number. The search code below it is the alphanumeric, and that's going to be essentially what ties to the website as far as being able to verify that, just to make sure it's authentic.
Gotcha. So I did pull this up as well. This is your guys' site. So whenever this little ascension number here, you can also, this is the search code. Basically, like this is from the research company's site. This is from your guys' site. So obviously, these things could, have different numbers, or have be photoshopped or anything like that. This is kind of the way to verify it, correct? We come over to your site, and we type in the search code, and these should numbers should match up basically 1 to 1, right?
Correct.
So like this one is 17, I believe. Let me just double check. And basically whatever you see on their site should match exactly what's on, the research company's site, and that's really the way to verify it going forward.
Yes, and then if
Yep.
there's any questions or one doesn't pop up, sometimes not all of them are published. Sometimes people will send them and say, "Hey, this is just for me," things like that, and then they might change their mind later. So
Yeah.
it's if you ever do see one that it's not showing up, and you can always email us and we can authenticate it on our side. Most of them should, but every
Mhm.
now and again we do have one that either was initially asked not to be posted and then was, or this, that, and the other. But if you ever need to know, the email works just as good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's good to know like people can reach out to, just in case. There's glitches that happen on everybody's end, or like you said, it's just private. So
Yeah,
you
we
guys
learned
have been.
quickly. We're not website developers, so I'll give you that much. We
Yeah.
we are lab people, and
Yeah.
so I will say the website, we are adding some components soon to be able to search a little bit easier and more effectively. But that is one part that that I will admit is not our strongest suit. That we're working on developing that to make it a more seamless process to build search.
Yep.
But you know, but we're lab people. That's all.
And something some people will be interested in. You did mention on the phone QR codes possibly coming soon. Is that something that you guys are looking into?
Yes, so a couple things that, don't hold me to these things because
Okay.
they change daily, but the
Yeah.
things that we are working on just to make it a little more seamless on the searching side is QR codes, possibly. That's what we've been talking about. We'd also like a feature to be able to search by the lot number. So in case you don't have the search code and you're not staring at it, and you're like, hey, I just want to see if this one's been tested, you can search just by lot, things like that, just to make the features more user friendly, just to be able to check that, hey, I know they use Freedom to test. Let me just see if this lot's been tested, things like that.
Gotcha. And okay, so next thing I wanted to look at, so we basically got this. Client is obviously going to be whoever sent in the intake form and whatever they put on it, right? And then we have, the date the sample was received, the reported date, and then this lot number. Is that assigned by whoever sends it in? Do you guys assign that? How does that process work?
Yes, so that's whoever's sending it in, that is their lot number. That lot number for us is required to either be on the vial itself or on the intake form. That's
Gotcha.
a question I do get a lot after the fact too. They say, well, can you put one on? The answer is compliantly, no, we can't.
Yeah.
We have to have it either on the vial or on the intake form. If you're asking us to put it on after the fact, it's just anything that you ask to put on after the fact once the report's been released, assuming it's not just like a clerical error,
Yeah.
compliantly we can't do, because that's just asking to essentially a small version of forging a report. So that's
For sure.
something we are pretty strict on. Is if you need something to be on the report, make sure it's either listed on the vial or on the intake form.
Awesome. Yeah. And that you can kind of verify, like I said, he said like on the vial, like they do have a picture down here, so you should be able to see it. Obviously, like you're gonna have to zoom in pretty far, and just different companies' labels are gonna be different either way. But that's one thing like that
Something
I've
you really gotta look.
you really gotta look, but it is good to see that there's something on there, and companies can kind of do that whatever way they want. They can make it bigger, make it more visible, whatever's gonna whatever's gonna make it more readable for the customer is probably the best at the end of the day. So we have that. We have the lot number. Obviously, the total purity that it tested. This comes up in two spots. Um, and then the appearance is just like whatever you kind of like see off the rip, right? So like if I send in something that's a white lyophilized powder, it'll just say like white lyophilized powder there, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then okay, so these graphs. Obviously, we have the mass identification. So can you break down these two graphs right here? As I understand it, this top one is if something is relatively pure, you'll see peaks and there won't be too many, little like jumps in the graph when you go to test this, but I'll let you explain further.
Yes, so this is something that I think is very, very important that we do in general as a lab, something that I really like that we started to do when we first started doing this, because it does give you just a little bit deeper dive into the information of what's on the report. Now, what it is essentially, the top one is going to be coming from the HPLC UV detector. So that's going to identify the peptide itself, and we'll show you if there's any impurities or any other peptides, things like that, that may not supposed to be in there, maybe they are supposed to be in there, based on the UV absorption. So one thing you see most commonly for like an impurity,
Yep.
um, for example, and this is a good sample, but if you would see something generally, it's a very generalization statement, but it'll be right to the left, to the right of the intended peak. What
Gotcha.
that would be is, generally speaking, what that would be is degradation. Maybe maybe it's broken down just a little bit and it's a fragment of itself.
Yep.
And so while it's not necessarily an impurity as like you think of it, it is an impurity in the sense of it's broken down into a slightly different version of itself, which lowers the impurity from what it's intended to be.
Gotcha.
So that's what you'd see most commonly. But again, you see all sorts of stuff on here. Sometimes we see, the complete wrong peptide. Sometimes
Yeah.
we see some things added, it's not supposed to be there, things like that. But it's a very good tool just to have, because it just gives the person reading the result just on the affirmation of, okay, like this is my test. 'Cause each one of these is their test, and how it looks. So which brings me to the next one.
Yep.
The next one is going
Let's
to
go.
be, ultimately, this is a very important one, and probably one that's underlooked.
Mhm.
This is what's coming directly off the mass spectrometer. So this, while there's this is how you would identify that this is, in fact, the peptides that I'm trying to have tested. So this is what would tell you based on the molecular weight that this is, in fact, GHK, BBC, TB.
Gotcha.
Um, a lot of the times, this is where you can go verify to say, hey, like this is a different peptide, or this has a stabilizer in it that we weren't expecting, things like that. This will give us a lot of information about what's actually in the sample.
Gotcha. And so basically the guidelines for at least overall, this total purity result are normally, 98 to 99% is kind of, what we see typically. Like how many, if you had to say like on average, like samples that come in, is there a big percentage that fail this ever? Do you see, like, what's the percentage you see either failed at 98% mark, or just you see just other stuff in the peptide?
You know, it's a hard question to answer because
Yeah.
some of the groups we work with are on different sides of this business. So some are, testing to see if they tried something different and wanting to see if how it's behaving, things like that.
Yeah.
So not always will those be great because it's, they're working to get great.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
generally speaking, I would say most of the things we receive are pretty good.
Okay.
But it does really shine a light on the importance of it because I will say, like, most of the time when they're not good, it's not like they're expecting them not to be good. So it's what I'm trying to say is it's a very good to have this. It's very good to have this as an informational thing, just because when you do have something that's showing an impurity or showing something you didn't expect, it's really important to know.
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. And then I have one more COA that it was kind of hard to find an endotoxin one, but I did find one. And this one, obviously, same thing. We, we have the exact same stuff up top, and this is just really just testing two things. So if you could just talk about maybe the testing process for this, and then it's the results just like a pass fail. Is this all people have to know?
Right. Yeah. So this one's a pretty simple one to read. We always run two replicates on it to show that it's consistent. One thing that we have recently started doing is we do ask that if you want endotoxins tested to send an additional vial. Reason
Yep.
being is if you think about the environment around you, even in a relatively clean environment, being a lab, there are endotoxins everywhere.
Yeah.
So one thing that we like to do is we like to make sure that when we do perform this test, you know that that one vial, the additional vial that you're sending, as soon as that is cracked open, that test is being performed immediately. We want to make sure that nothing from the exterior environment, nothing that could possibly provide a false positive is being entered into that realm. So that's why we started doing that. But ultimately, as far as the readability of this, it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
If it's above that threshold, we will give you the numerical number of where it's at,
Okay.
and then anything after that, a lot of times if there is a positive, we would suggest, hey, maybe you want to send another one from that batch to see if it's isolated, things like that. And we'll kind of work with you on those types of things to figure out how affected is this batch.
Oh, okay. Awesome. I think, yeah, and you can let me know, is there anything else people should know on these COAs, or does that pretty much cover it? Obviously, we showed we can search it on your site to kind of verify that it's like one to one. Is there anything else people should be looking at on these?
Um, I think you covered most of it. I think one other thing that could be touched on is the, I think the question we get, you mentioned it, but I think the question that we get asked a lot is regarding the lot number specifically and regarding the received and reported date. I think
Yeah.
one thing that a lot of the people who we work with do is they do send frequent tests to show that, hey, here's the latest lot, here's the latest received date. Sometimes we will get requests saying, hey, can you verify the authenticity of this? And it's something from like last year. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, it's authentic, but there's a good possibility of degradation at this point or something. And so I do think two important parts is take a look at the received date, take a look at the lot number, take a look at the information as a whole when
Okay.
you're looking at these things to decide whether you feel like this product has been sufficiently tested. And
Hmm.
then again, you can always reach out to us if you have specific questions.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me into the next part, which I know a lot of people were just curious about in general. And it's going to be interesting from your point of view because you just mentioned it, degradation of like even a lyophilized powder, right? We can start with the lyophilized version. And I know there's not a bunch, you know, you just see more than obviously the average person would of like, testing samples that are maybe a year old or older than that. What would you say like the general like life cycle is for a lyophilized powder? And I don't know, we can kind of break it into just room temperature is probably most common what we have, or like refrigerated, freezer. Like how long, if you just had to give your best guess, would you say like, and it could be different based on each peptide, but how long does it actually take those peptides to degrade?
So overall, it's been, 'cause we've done a couple stability studies on these, and
Okay.
specifically we've done some on a few that we feel like are prone to degradation. We've done it on a few that we feel like are not. We've done it on this, that, and the other, just to kind of get the education of, okay, like eh, these are relatively not studied as far as the things we've like tried to look up and to figure out like what is out there as far as like the white papers and things that go
Yeah.
are online. What we found is most of them that we've looked at are relatively stable.
Okay.
And we've also had that test because we are in Tennessee. Tennessee gets hot. Sometimes they'll send it USPS and it'll end up being in the mail over the weekend. So
Yeah.
you'll take it and like, ooh, okay, well, this will be a good test. But a lot of the times it'll surprise you, and these things are more stable than you think. Um, Now, I think in this sense, just the general like good practice of storage is a
Yeah.
good thing to keep in mind because again, there's a lot of different peptides and they all are going to have slightly different characteristics as far as degradation goes.
Hmm.
So while I will say most of them are stable, you don't know. So when
Exactly.
you're handling these things, just like what we do with our lab standards is we'll keep them in a cold, dark place when for storage. We won't leave them out for longer than we need to. If it's something that we use every day, we'll keep it in the fridge. Things like that that are just general good lab practices. Um, but overall, stability's been pretty surprising, for my opinion.
Gotcha. And I know you guys see, a lot of the GLPs and stuff like that. Do you like best guess wise, if someone's, looking to, just have this like long term for the sample, or, in general just have a peptide longer term, do you recommend keeping in the fridge? Do you recommend freezing it? What's your take on that?
So freezer is always going to be um, probably the preferred method for long term storage.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, if it's gonna be long term, freezer's gonna be your best bet. Uh, Followed by fridge, and then lastly room temp.
Room temperature.
Um,
Yep.
but anything cold, dark space, freezer is always from a lab perspective gonna be your best bet.
Gotcha. And then another common one that comes up, if somebody has it in the freezer, let's say they, pull it out to reconstitute, should that should they let it, get to room temperature before that? Is there any issue with, obviously it's like it's been in the freezer for a while, let's just say 6 months, something like that. When they pull it out, should they let it get to room temperature, or what would be like the protocol there to reconstitute?
I mean, the thaw cycle is very quick,
Okay.
very quick. A lot of times, like we'll keep them for a short period of time in case like retesting would be needed, and so even then, once we take it out of the fridge, um, we only have to wait a couple minutes until it's fully thawed, and that's after it's been reconstituted. So
Gotcha.
you wouldn't have to wait a long time. Truthfully, by the time you have it ready, it's
Yeah.
probably fine. Um,
Okay. Okay, cool. And then from the other side of that, because it comes up all the time, we talked about it, different peptides, just degrade quicker, especially just the bacteriostatic water side of it. Like once it's reconstituted, we can just say something like tirzepatide or retatrutide, one of the GLPs. Like the normal guidelines, like 30 days, and then it starts to degrade. I don't know if you have any studies or like information on that. Just like best guess wise, is it 30 days? Does it last a little bit longer? And is there any, you know, degradation that happens down the line. Let's say if you send it to 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, so I think one thing to consider too is also what you just said on like the storage of that. If a good way to think about it too, just to kind of put it very simple, is like if I left my water bottle on the desk for a couple days and just because I forgot about it,
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't pick it up and finish the water bottle. So anything that like think about it from just a general like anything at room temp is going to have environmental conditions that might compromise the integrity.
Yeah.
So just think about that more from a degradation perspective, also a microbial perspective. Things at room temp do like to grow things that you don't want in there.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And then one more side of that, the bacteriostatic water side of it. There's a big debate whether you have your reconstitution solution that come from research companies that contain the benzyl alcohol, or the actual Hospira Pfizer brand. Is there any, like, if you had like a preference to use, like, obviously I don't know, like in the lab I'm assuming you guys, whenever you do this, if you reconstitute, you use the Pfizer brand, but is there anything people should kind of keep an eye out for there? And then do you think that Pfizer brand would last longer after like pierced? Like, what are the general guidelines around that?
So that's something that I think that I think I'll have a better answer if you ask me that again in a few weeks.
Okay,
We are doing some studies on that to
that's
try to
awesome.
figure out just the integrity of water in general. We've been asked that a lot lately, kind of like what I said earlier with the increase of endotoxins tests. We've had an increase of people asking about water and can you test endotoxins on this? Can you test this and the other? So we have started looking into that. I don't have a long enough study to give you an educated answer on that,
Gotcha.
but that's in the works, and we can table that one. I can probably give you a much better answer.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think people would be interested for sure. And then I guess the other part, kind of moving away from the purity breakdown. So after you perform all these tests, a lot of people don't know, like, you get it in, the test is done, you've done everything. What is the process of disposing of the samples, sending that COA back? I'm assuming it's just like emailed back to whoever ordered it, and then you're just done with it. Obviously, you guys like to stay a little bit more involved. Like, you're pretty responsive to stuff. So like, what does the end part of the testing look like?
Right. So one question we get every now and again is, can you send it back to us?
Yeah.
Is no, definitely can't. Part of our testing process is we do use different acids and different types of things to reconstitute this, where it is would be considered biohazard waste at that point.
Yeah.
We'll hold the sample normally for a few days just to make sure there wasn't any questions, just in case someone asks, hey, can you look into this, or can you do it? Because a lot of times we can do types of retesting or can do a deeper dive if it becomes something of question. Um, and we are a lab, like we're not. It's research. We're not perfect all the time,
Yeah.
so we do hold on to it for a couple days just to make sure that people are satisfied with the results and there's no questions. After that, it is considered bio waste and dispose of it. And then the COA is emailed, and then it's also at the same time uploaded to the portal to be verified.
Awesome. And then I guess from that side of it too, obviously, I guess what would kind of the, like, two things. What would the percentage breakdown be of like who research companies wise you've been seeing like business from, and then like if you just best guess off the top of your head, and then also like what are some of the biggest orders that you've seen from just testing different batches, testing, a lot of companies will send stuff in like I need 40 different batches tested for all these different samples. Like, what's kind of the biggest one you've seen?
It definitely varies. It varies all over the board.
Yep.
Some will get one, some will get 100. So it's one of those. I think that just depends on frequency of batches, frequency of testing, frequency of just kind of what they're trying to figure out, and like obviously from our perspective, we do have a huge bias with that because
Yep.
we've seen stuff that eh, are it's not great. And
Mm-hmm.
we've seen stuff that like one batch is very different from another batch, things like that. So our bias is natural, just in the sense of, I think every batch needs to be tested. There needs to be some sort of organization on how these things differentiate, because if you get one batch today and another batch tomorrow, we can pretty much guarantee they might be similar, but they're not going to be the same.
Yeah.
So as far as frequency goes, so I think, and again, this isn't, we only know kind of what we see,
Yeah.
but I think some will kind of send them all at once. Some of them kind of parcel them out as they get them, but they do vary all across the board.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think that's one of the main drawing points I've heard from like you guys. A lot of, more people are doing continuous testing because you guys still sticking to that, 24 to 48 hour, turnaround time for these tests?
Yes, so that's something that's really important to us. As we've kind of gotten bigger and worked with a few more companies, we are trying to scale appropriately. In my career of lab, speed is a very close second to accuracy.
Yeah.
Just in the sense of, you need these things before you know what to do with them. So if you're waiting a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're just kind of sitting in limbo to make decisions. So we do try to turn them around as quickly as we possibly can, and know that people are working around the clock to do that. If we have your sample, it's not sitting on deaf ears.
Yeah.
So we have people that are working on it in the evening hours, the morning hours, and then again, if you ever are curious, if we have your sample and you're like, hey, where is it? Email us and we'll tell you, hey, it'll probably be done in a few hours. We'll probably done 12 hours, but we are pretty transparent in where we're at. And so far, we've been able to keep up with our promised term time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And yeah, but I know you guys are super busy with stuff. I've seen seven maybe or so companies send stuff out just because they have such long wait times for certain stuff. So yeah, in general, I think you guys have been doing a great job with that side of things. Is there anything that you would like to see more, research companies or more of these samples? Like, is there anything from their side besides proper lot numbers? And I think we talked about having conformity tests of multiple from a batch. Is there anything from your guys' end you could see that these companies could do better on their samples or just in general?
That's a pretty general question, in the sense of, I think some are doing great, and you can tell. I mean, some people definitely care about these um, results, and care about the information. And when they get the information, they'll ask on, hey, like, what do you think of this, or X, Y, and Z. I think from our perspective, you can tell the people that are doing the frequent testing, and you see the lot numbers change, and you're kind of able to see from that perspective of, everything in lab is based off of a lot. Like, we get a new lot of anything here, we have to log it and say, verify that that lot works before we conduct testing, things like that. Like, that shows a chain of custody of, like, everything that's working in a lab, all that all works kind of together. And it's the same thing on that end. So just
Mm-hmm.
seeing the ability to kind of track and trace these samples back to a COA, I think speaks volumes. And I think it definitely is kind of gearing that direction, as far as like the industry as a whole. But I just think the more insight we can give, and the more we can tie it back to a specific test, the more important it is for us and the more important to them.
For sure, for sure. And I guess we can wrap it up. The Is there any advice you'd give to either, just researchers or beginners? Like, as obviously we went through the whole COA process, everything like that. Like, if they are sending out, do you recommend they do independent testing? Do you like just to learn like more about the space? Obviously, the conversations are like this are like why like more people just need to see the stuff actually get talked about, see how it breaks down, is other than like reading those COAs or anything, like either reaching out to you, any advice for somebody that's just kind of confused in this world and like where to start?
Yeah, I think it's to talk about it. I think that's kind of how we started this. Is, hey, let's give them all the information on this sheet of paper, and let them be able to see it for themselves, as far as like, hey, this is exactly what we're doing. Where we try to be as transparent as we can, with to give them as much data as they can, whether they've seen this type of test or not before.
Yeah.
Um, and then talk about it with, your community and talk about it. This is kind of one of the reasons why I want to do this is not everybody has seen chromatography before. Not everybody's seen uh, what comes off of a UV detector. That's not really, a normal thing that you see every day.
No,
So I
no,
think just having these questions and being able to answer them and being able to kind of explain it um, goes a long way. Because I think I said this to you last time we spoke, but
yeah,
just a number on a piece of paper doesn't mean anything if there's not some information behind it.
for sure, for sure. And I think it's everybody just needs to kind of look at the whole picture when it comes to these things. I always tell people to kind of look at a history of these COAs as well, just to make sure it's like frequent testing, because like we talked about, it could be a sample from a year ago and could be massively different results. So I think yeah, just getting people to actually look at these things and look for them on just look for them to keep getting updated is very important. And I appreciate you guys because obviously you kind of stepped, I feel like you guys stepped into the industry where a lot of people can't get their testing done in a reasonable amount of time. And like you've been open and transparent. Like we talked on, I think the first time we talked was like Labor Day for like an hour because we didn't have it. There was no UPS shipping or there's no shipments coming in. So I know
It
you
was
guys are
also my
super busy.
birthday that day, so that's how serious we take this.
Wow. Well, that shows the commitment right there for
Yeah,
sure.
no, we're very dedicated to what we do. I mean, we love
That's
the lab
awesome.
space. Everybody we work with has been involved in the lab space for a very long time. I've worked with people I work with here, I've worked with for decades. So we've all kind of grown up in this space together, learned a lot about this. We have experts in this field, and that's why I like doing what I like doing because it's not something I'm definitely not the brains behind this whole operation. I have a team of people who, if I don't know something, I can ask them and vice versa. So I think in a lab space in general, especially in a research realm
Yep,
where compliance is, it, it lacks compared to other regulatory bodies.
for
So
sure.
it's just important to have a team of people you can trust and knowing that the information you're getting is the accurate information that you want.
Yeah. And I like the perspective you guys come from too, because it really is, especially the research space, it's not really regulated. So it's almost the people, looking at these things and deciding what's important to them that's really going to shape it going forward. So,
Right. And yeah, that's why I think that's the other reason why we put so much effort into that communication because ultimately you're trusting the lab in a lot of ways.
yeah,
In some of the other labs we've been involved in, there's a lot more regulatory requirements in this space. That's another reason why we list all of these things on our report because it gives you the information knowing that this is how it's being tested, this is what we're doing. If you have questions, ask us about it. Because in reality, there's a lot of freedom that we're given in the research realm that should not be taken advantage of. So we want to make sure that you know that this is what you're getting. And if you have questions, tell us and we'll show you the sample, we'll walk you through it, we'll explain it to you.
for sure. Yeah, no, this was great. I'd love to do we can hop into some different areas in a follow-up, and I'm sure people are going to have questions based on this. So I honestly just greatly appreciate your time. If you want to tell people where they can, I know a lot of people are looking for independent tests or just want to, check out the website and learn more about Freedom. So I'll link the website in the email, but if there's anywhere else they can find you or anything you recommend they look at, definitely go shout it out.
Yeah. Yeah, we're very responsive on the email, so just shoot us an email if you have questions. And again, we can chat again if you have any additional questions or people have some follow-up.
Yeah,
Um, we like to hear what people are wanting to know and it helps us. The more questions we get, the more we know, where to point our sales and how to help out.
no, for sure. Yeah. Like I said, I appreciate it. I know you are short on time because you said we were a little bit short staffed and you got to get your hands dirty. So I know how seriously you guys take it. And like I said, I
Gotta
think
get
you're
these folks
filling a,
on here. So.
yeah, no, you're filling a big gap in the community overall. So I appreciate it. And I know a lot of other people do as well.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time and thanks for having me on today. And
Yeah.
yeah, love to talk to you again.
Yeah, no, for sure. We will schedule something, and if we can get, maybe hop into a different area. I think this was very helpful with the COAs and people, people will leave feedback and stuff like that. But I appreciate you being, open and a resource to the community.
Have a good one. All right.
All right, you too, man.